just gonna leave these back.
Almost got it all set.
Yes, it's 1, 7.
I just forwarded y'all the link to it. I forward this to my door right now. I'm gonna go step outside to test it, make sure I can hear things. So I'm going to keep talking for a second. Just so I know that the audio is actually working.
Is this on Zoom?
Sorry?
YouTube.
YouTube?
Oh, YouTube.
YouTube live stream. She just went.
So we got this out. But it's not for sure.
Are you going to be watching that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you want to do it?
Yeah, and two as well.
Except for the contract.
Except for.
Oh, perfect. Then we'll-
So are we here with two and I to agree that?
Actually, we're gonna disagree.
The way?
Yes.
Okay. But two, good.
2 is fine.
So just to confirm, I have 2, 6, 7, 8, 9.
1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yes.
Okay, I agree.
2 is the tracker, the advertisement.
Okay.
All right, so first down session, the Honorable John Rayleigh presiding. John, let's go all the way around.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right.
Council, please introduce yourselves from my left, my right.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Gunnar Osteen. That's GUNNAR like the preacher. No relation, no. And to my left is Luke Brock. That's LUKEBROCK. And we are here representing the defendant in this case, Mountain Trackers LLC. Mountain Trackers with 2 Ks, TRAKKERS.
seeing me do this, I'm adjusting my hearing aids. So far, I haven't had it. Thank you, sir. Yes,
Malik Moore, along with my co-counsel Haley Nunky, here on behalf of the plaintiff.
can you speak a little more slowly?
Yes,
Thank you. All right,
Malik Moore.
Malik.
The last name is AN-NOOR.
Yes, sir.
And I'm here on behalf of the plaintiff, Logan Day, along with my co-counsel Haley Nunky, and that's Nuenke.
The plaintiff name again, please.
Logan Day, D-A-Y.
Thank you. All right. Does anyone else need to be introduced? Anyone else want to participate?
We have two witnesses, Your Honor. Would you like us to?
You can call them. All right. Anything we need to address before we begin the trial?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense does have a couple of pretrial matters as well as a motion in limiting in one part.
As the defendant, I'd like to hear if the plaintiff has anything first, and then we'll turn to you. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. We have a few housekeeping matters and a motion of limiting in one part.
All right. Let's hear what you have from the plaintiff's side.
As far as housekeeping matters, may we assume all witnesses have been pre-sworn?
Yes, sir.
And may we move freely about the will during opening and closings?
Yes, sir.
And finally, may we constructively invoke the rule 615?
Constructively, yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. That concludes our housekeeping matters. Would you like us to move to our MIL now?
Let's hear your housekeeping defense.
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly on Rule 615, we do have a party representative for today's case who will be present for today's trial, but otherwise we agree with invoking the rule.
All right.
And then in terms of the pretrial matters for the defense, we would just ask your permission to stand and utilize the well for cross-examinations and direct examinations.
Yes, just request permission to approach the witness if you do, but otherwise you're free to use the well.
Yes, Your Honor, and I would like to direct the court's attention. Both sides have agreed to the pre-admission of some exhibits. If you would like me to give those to you.
Is that correct, plaintiff's counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. We've agreed to 6 exhibits being pre-admitted.
What are those numbers?
It is Exhibit 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Will there be a dispute as to 3 and 4, 5?
For at least 5, Your Honor, there will be a dispute. I'm not sure it's.
We don't know. Okay, so as to the others, if you're offering it, obviously all the rules, and we'll see what happens there. Anything else from the plaintiff's side? We'll go back to the defense.
Just a motion limiting in one party.
Let's hold on that. Anything else from you?
Nothing else from the defense regarding pretrial, just our motion limiting after the fact.
Okay, let's hear the plaintiff's motion then.
Yes, Your Honor. This goes to, or as you know, Your Honor, this is a products liability case in which our client, Mr. Logan Day, ended up dying because of the negligent acts of the defendant, Mountain Trackers. In particular,
I don't know that. I know that's your claim.
yes, Your Honor, that's our claim. And because of the actions of Mountain Trackers, Mr. Logan Day died. In regarding this Mountain Tracker, there is a contract associated with it, Exhibit 5. We believe that this contract shouldn't be brought into evidence because it would confuse the issues to the jury. In particular, Exhibit 5 has a clause regarding liability and when liability will be limited. However, this clause is not relevant to today's case because any of the exceptions to liability are not an issue in this case.
What specifically is it? What kind of contract? Between whom and whom and favor?
Your Honor, may I approach and tender if you'd like?
Sure. Thank you.
And while he does that, I'll explain. Exhibit 5 is a service contract. It's the terms and conditions that are involve the use of the Mountain Tracker, the product at issue in today's case. I'm referring to Clause 6, the limitation of liability. There is a limitation of liability, but it has to do with any delays resulting in things out of the control of Day Tracker. However, the claims being brought against Day Tracker today were all directly in control of them, and for that reason, the introduction of this contract, and in particular, the limiting of liability, will confuse the issues to the jury.
Counsel, give me a second to read it very quickly. You can be seated. Okay, defense counsel, response.
Yes, Your Honor. May I approach and tender a copy of the stipulations opposing parties agreed to in this case? It does concern this contract.
Absolutely. Which one in particular?
Yes, Your Honor. If you take a look at stipulation 5, the last sentence of stipulation 5 states that both parties have agreed to the liability definitions in that contract and have agreed to be bound by them. And therefore, opposing parties already agreed to what they're trying to win the act.
Parties disagree to the extent of that duty, but agree that the duty is defined by the contractual obligations and zero representation. Response, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Clause 6, which is the clause we're in particular trying to limit me out, refers to the limitation of liability. Stipulation 5 refers to the extent of any duty. So we haven't agreed to the use of clause 6 in the limitation of liability, and we re-urge our motion that the inclusion of this contract would confuse the issues to the jury.
Okay. Anything else from either side on this particular point?
None from the defense.
The motion is denied. Any other motion?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense does have a motion limiting in one part. Your Honor, this trial is bifurcated. We are only here to discuss the liability issue, not any monetary damages. And so if we just ask that a limine be granted, preventing the plaintiff from discussing monetary damages or the exact dollar amount that might have came from the plaintiff's injuries, as that's not what we're here to decide, and it's irrelevant when we move forward.
Your Honor, we don't plan on eliciting any testimony as to the exact amount of damages here because, for one reason, Logan Day perished as a result of the actions of Mountain Tracker. But to be clear, we don't plan on eliciting any of these compensatory issues.
All right, that motion is granted. Approach the bench, and you can, by the way, you can constructively approach the bench for the trial today. Don't go into any amount of monetary damages without questioning the commission. All right, what else?
Your Honor, that's all from the defense. We're ready for trial.
All right. Let's hear the opening statement.
May it please the court.
Yes.
Mountain truckers broke their promise. And that is the reason why Logan Day is no longer alive. Anytime, anywhere, any condition, we've got your back. Those are the words of Mountain Truckers. And those are the words that Logan Day relied on. And when he needed them the most, they were nowhere to be found. Now, I want to take a moment and introduce you to Logan Day. Logan Day was an outdoorsman, loved hiking, loved the thrill of it, always chasing new heights, setting his next adventure, finding new goals. This was his passion. He loved it, and he had much experience with it. However, what he did not know is that he couldn't trust the device to keep him safe. Now, you're going to hear throughout today's trial from one of Logan Day's friends, and she'll tell you that they set out on this journey together. And then on November 16th, they parted ways. He went out on a solo trip, which is not uncommon for hikers to do. And that's when things went downhill. Now, hiking can be unpredictable. Conditions can change fast. But that's why he had his GPS tracking device. He could press it in case of emergency, or so he thought. Now, Logan Day saw a blizzard rolling in, and he knew how bad it was. And that's why he pressed the button. He called for help. He pressed that button, and nothing happened. Members of the jury, after he pressed that button, he was out alone in the wilderness for 10 days. Blizzard rolling in, freezing, thirsty, hungry, alone. He was out alone in the elements, knowing that his hope, that device, is useless. Members of the jury, Logan Day died out in the elements by himself because the device simply didn't work.
Objection argumentative.
They made a promise in their advertisements. Anytime, anywhere, any condition, we've got your back. And they breached that promise and they breached their duty. And that is why we've got a suit today for negligence. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about what that means. We today have the burden. And that burden is to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence that Mountain Trekkers is liable. Now, let's walk through these elements. Element number one, that Mountain Trekkers was negligent. We can break that down a little bit. What does negligence mean? It means that they deviated from the standard of care that a reasonable company would have or should have shown in those similar conditions. Would a reasonable company advertise this device to be a life-saving device, a lifeline, and then not respond when he needed it the most? Element number two, that Logan Day was harmed. And element number three, that Mountain Trekkers' negligence was a substantial factor in causing Logan Day's harm. Now, we will prove these elements to you today through the evidence, and we will prove them by a preponderance of an element of the evidence, which simply means you can think about it like a scale. If you have a scale and there are two sides, if we simply tip that scale just a little bit in our favor, that means you must find for the plaintiff. And I'm confident that at the conclusion of this trial, when you have seen all of the evidence that we will present to you today, that you will come to the only conclusion that that evidence will support and justice will demand. And you'll find for the plaintiff, Logan Day. You find the defendant, Mountain Trekker, hold them responsible. You find them liable for negligence.
Counsel for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Hey, please, court. Not every tragedy has someone to blame. You just heard about a man, Mr. Logan Day, an experienced outdoorsman, who you're going to hear today had significant experience walking on trails in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains in South America. A man, by all accounts, was very experienced. The plaintiff counsel just told you the reason that Mr. Day died was a failure by Mountain Trekkers to uphold the duty they owed to him. As you're going to find out today, the problem with their theory and what they want you to believe is that Mountain Trekkers did uphold that duty to him. And unfortunately, Mr. Day
was a victim of Mother Nature. You're going to hear testimony today that Mr. Day knew there was snow coming before he went out on his trek. He knew that simple flurries could turn into a blizzard. And he knew that there was a lot more risk involved than a simple snowstorm. Today, you're going to hear testimony from the owner of Mountain Trackers, Miss Nahal Saeed. And she's going to tell you that Mountain Trackers was started, and specifically the GPS tracking system was started to be a tool, one tool in the tool belt of an experienced trekker. Only one tool. But what you're going to hear today is that that GPS unit was never intended as a cure-all. It was never intended as a silver bullet. It was never intended to be a golden parachute. And the reason for that is the way the system works is that someone with this tracker sends out a ping. That ping is received by someone at Mountain Trackers, and then local EMS, emergency services, is alerted. After they're alerted, Mountain Trackers owes no further responsibility. They've done their job. That's what the device is intended to do. And you're also going to hear today that Mr. Day knew that. He knew it. Now, opposing counsel just told you that Mr. Day was outside for a very long period of time after he sent that ping. What you're going to hear today is that the reason for that has nothing to do with Mountain Trackers and everything to do with the local EMS. Folks, at the end of the day, we owe the responsibility to ourselves. If we put ourselves in a dangerous situation, that's on us. Counsel told you that they do have the burden in today's case. And she's right. But I've got a different analogy than a simple feather on a scale. You see, by a preponderance of the evidence means that they have to prove every single element of their claim to you more likely than not. I want you to imagine a football field. They're starting at the 0-yard line, and they've got to drive that ball all the way to the 51-yard line. They're not going to be able to do that today. And the reason is, not every tragedy has someone to blame. Thank you.
All right, then call your first witness.
Prior to calling our first witness, we would like to read stipulation 9 into the record.
Right.
Dr. Joy Akonda performed an autopsy on Logan Day's body on December 4th, 2021. Dr. Akonda concluded that Logan Day died on November 30th, 2021, and that the primary cause of death was dehydration.
All right, proceed.
This time we call Gabby Delgado to the stand. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Gabby Delgado.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I used to be a pharmacist, but I quit that job and I decided to become a professional backpacker. It's honestly the best decision that I've made in my life.
And can you explain to us what exactly a backpacker is?
Yeah, so it's like a combination of a long-term hiker and a camper. So we carry a backpack with all the essentials that we need, and we head out on some pretty leggy hikes.
Tell me a little bit more about those hikes.
Yeah, so there's trails, different trails that you can go on. I'm actually one of the few people who have completed the Triple Crown hiking trail.
So, would you consider yourself an experienced hiker?
Absolutely, yes.
And what is the Triple Crown of hiking?
So it's basically when you complete 3 of the toughest trails. So there's the Pacific Crest Trail. People call it the PCT. I did that one first. And then there's the Appalachian Trail. They call it AT. And then the last one is the Continental Trail, which is the CBT.
Now, how are you familiar with Logan Day?
Well, I met Logan when I was doing the Appalachian Trail. He was actually one of the first people I met on that trail.
And could you describe your relationship for us?
Sure. Logan and we were really close friends. I called him Eagle. He looked out for me and he motivated me when I was struggling on the Appalachian Trail. And after that, we just became really close.
Your Honor, permission to publish what has been pre-marked and pre-admitted as Exhibit 1 to the jury.
Yes.
And how would you describe Logan?
Or are you publishing it to the jury now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Logan was one of the most experienced backpackers that I know. And as someone who's completed the Triple Crown hiking trail, I've come in contact with a lot of people who are experienced, but he was by far the best one.
Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about the reason why we're here today. So tell me about the last time that you saw Logan.
Well, that day was November 16th of 2021. Logan was about to continue the CBT trail that he was on, and my house was close by. So he stopped at my house to kind of like recharge.
And can you tell me about the trail that he was hiking?
Yeah, so there's the trail that he passed through was leading to the Ghost Ranch Trail, which would estimate take about 7 days to get there.
And what day did he start his hike?
So he started the hike on November 16th. That day. Before he did that, we looked at the weather, and so we made sure that everything was going to be okay.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 3.
Granted.
Now, without going into detail, can you tell me what you're looking at?
So this is the weather conditions that we looked at before Logan headed out to the trail.
And are you familiar with these weather conditions?
Yeah, this is exactly what we saw the day of.
And is this a fair and accurate screenshot of those weather conditions as you remember them?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, we move to admit Exhibit 3 into evidence.
The objection.
Yes, I am.
Response.
Your Honor, these weather conditions are not hearsay. She has personal knowledge and can speak to that, as well as the fact that they go to more of the effect on the listener and how Logan Day would have perceived these weather conditions on the day of rather than the truth of the matter.
Where are these weather conditions published?
They are a screenshot of the weather conditions on the weather app that day.
On the weather app,
Yes, on an iPhone.
not a governmental agency.
No, Your Honor.
Any other response regarding the hearsay objection?
I stand on my previous response.
The objection, please sustain.
Were you familiar with the weather conditions on that day?
Yeah, so given that I live there, I know the weather pretty regularly around that area. The weather wasn't too bad. It was a little snowflakes here and there, but just knowing that you'll be out on the trail 7 days, you want to make sure you're prepared.
And what steps would you typically take to prepare?
Well, you always have your tracker, just in case things go south.
Did Logan have his tracker?
Yes, he did. He definitely had it.
Now, what happened after Logan started on this trail?
Well, the day he left, I didn't know it would be the last day I saw him. We were supposed to touch bases in 7 days when he reached his next location. And after 7 or 8 days went by and I didn't hear from him, I immediately called the rescue team to go out.
And after you called the rescue team, what happened next?
It took 8 days for them to find his body.
Just so we're clear, what was the day that you contacted the rescue team?
November 24th, 2021.
And what day was his body found?
8 days after that, December 2nd.
You said he had his tracker with him. What kind of tracker did he have?
It was the mountain tracker.
And are you familiar with the mountain tracker?
Yes, but after what happened to Logan, I would never get one of those. If it doesn't work in an emergency situation, then what's the point of it? It's just a money grab.
We passed the witness.
Sorry, was there an objection?
I was gonna object to speculation, Your Honor, but it felt that it might be untimely.
All right, let's proceed.
Good afternoon. Yeah, see.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Delgado.
Hi.
Now, you testified, or you said earlier, that you're an experienced hiker yourself.
Yes, I am.
You had also met that Triple Crown achievement.
I did.
But, so, because of your experience, you were very aware of the dangers with what you'd like to do.
Sure. There's risks in hiking. Yeah, I was aware.
Extreme risks.
Yeah, depending on the conditions.
Well, you could die, right?
Possibly, yeah.
And not only were you aware of this, but Mr. Day was aware of this as well, right?
Yeah, he was.
And actually, he was a more experienced hiker than yourself.
He was the best hiker that I've ever met. So yeah, that's true.
That Triple Crown achievement that we talked about earlier, and that you spoke before I even got up here, he'd actually done that multiple times.
Yes, he did.
In your own words, he was the most experienced hiker you've ever met.
Absolutely.
And you've met a lot of hikers.
Yes.
But he was a bit of a risk taker, right?
He was. Yes, he enjoyed the thrill.
He took risks that you never would.
Yes, he was more experienced, so obviously I wouldn't take the same risk.
Right, because they're dangerous. And some of these risks include summiting mountains in a thunderstorm.
Yeah, he survived many conditions that I probably would never say. So,
These involve crossing rivers with white water.
yes.
Okay. I want to talk about the morning that Mr. Day headed out. You said earlier that he stayed with you the night before?
Yeah, for a few days.
Right. And during that time, you were aware that there was snow on the forecast.
Yes, there were snowflakes that night, or,
Yes.
or the next morning.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
it's okay.
And Mr. Day was also aware that there was snow in the forecast.
Yes,
And you know that snow flurries can quickly turn into a blizzard.
yes, absolutely.
And Mr. Day knew that as well.
Yes, we all know that.
And being caught out in a blizzard while you're in the middle of a trek, that's dangerous, right?
Exactly, that's why you have to be prepared.
That's life-threatening.
Yes,
You weren't totally comfortable with the situation. Is that right?
that's right.
Because again, it was dangerous.
Right, and being that I'm not experienced, I would not put myself in that situation.
And Mr. Day told you that he knew the weather could turn,
Sure.
but in his own words, that's the risk we take.
Yeah, so when things go south, you're prepared, you're ready to battle through anything like that. So yes.
In your own words, though, even experience can't beat Mother Nature.
Exactly.
Nothing further.
No need for redirect.
I'm sorry.
No need for redirect.
All right. We'll step there. Whoa, say. All right, transpire next witness, please.
Your Honor, at this time, plaintiffs call Sasha Heyman to the stand.
We have a stipulation that the witnesses have been pre-sworn.
Your Honor, wasn't clarified pre-trial, but if you would like to just further stipulate that all that's.
That might help us save some time. All witnesses have been pre-sworn.
Sounds good.
Let's proceed.
Good afternoon, Ms. Heyman. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Sasha Heyman.
And Ms. Heyman, what do you do for a living?
I'm currently a food delivery driver.
And do you enjoy this job?
Yeah, I do.
Have you always been a food delivery driver?
No, I haven't.
What did you do before becoming a food delivery driver?
Before I became a food delivery driver, I worked for Mountain Trackers as an emergency services liaison.
Your Honor, at this time, we would like to publish what's been pre-marked and pre-admitted as exhibit number 2.
For the record, what is number 2?
It is a advertisement for Mountain Trackers Tracker Gym 4. Ms. Heyman, what is this a picture of?
I can't.
Ms. Heyman, I'll direct you to exhibit number 2.
Well, you got another copy.
Sorry, I don't think my witness monitor works.
Your Honor, may I approach you?
Yes.
Ms. Heyman, what is this a photo of?
This is an advertisement for Mountain Trackers.
And how are you familiar with the product on this advertisement?
This is one of the GPS trackers that that sends SOS alert systems that would then be relayed to us. And so since I worked at Mountain Trackers, that's how I know what this is.
Okay, and I want to talk about exactly what your responsibilities were at Mountain Trackers. So let's start at the beginning. What was your role at Mountain Trackers during November 18th?
On November 18th, I was working as the emergency services liaison that day.
And what does an emergency services liaison do?
So my job as an emergency services liaison is whenever one of these devices that we have that offer the SOS alert services, whenever someone hits that SOS button, it sends an alert to me, the emergency services liaison, and then I use that GPS location to try to find the closest search and rescue team. And then we work together to try to find the best path to getting to the location of the alert.
And Ms. Heyman, are there multiple ways for you to work together with an emergency service team?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways. We did an extensive training on this about the different ways to collaborate with emergency services, because this is life or death sometimes. And so you can either actually call them, the emergency services, and try to collaborate on the search process, or you can just send an internet ping. But it was really instilled in us that the best way to do this was
Objection, Your Honor.
to call.
If I may constructively approach outside of the show of the jury.
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe Ms. Heyman was about to testify that the best method for working with EMS services was to call them. We would have 2 objections to this line of testimony. Firstly, that it is hearsay. she was told this through a training, and they're offering it for the truth of the matter asserted. And then secondly, that this is a unqualified expert opinion. Ms. Heyman is simply a middleman. She puts people into contact with EMS services. For her to definitively state that this is the best means of doing so would be outside her qualifications as a lay witness.
Is it your position that she is not allowed to discuss her training?
Your Honor, she didn't discuss her training in terms of what she was told, but aspects of that are hearsay. They're what was told to her and they're being relayed to her as if they were her own opinion, whereas they're out of court statements being offered for the truth of the matter. She can testify to what she does, but she can't testify to what's the best method for going about doing the job that she was told.
Again, is it your position that she is not permitted to testify that she was trained that the number one goal was to make the phone call, if that is indeed the testimony? You're saying that's hearsay?
We would say it is hearsay that she was told.
Response.
Your Honor, that's not hearsay. That was training she received by her employer. In this case, her employer was Mountain Tracker, the party opponent. And for that reason, her testifying about her training would not be hearsay.
Overruled. Let's proceed.
All right, Ms. Heyman, I want to take a step back and really talk about the training you received as an emergency liaison.
And let me counsel the witness. The court is interested in the training. And you can describe your training without quoting anyone. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
All right, proceed.
And so, Ms. Heyman, what was your training for being an emergency liaison at Mountain Trackers?
Yeah, so my training basically was the two ways, as I mentioned, to contact the emergency service providers and search and rescue team. One was either by phone and the other was by internet ping. And it was instilled in us that the best way to contact the emergency services was by phone because it helped with the collaborative search process for us to be communicating and helping them find the best path to where that alert was coming from.
And Ms. Heyman, why is it important, based on your knowledge, to do a phone call instead of the internet?
I didn't hear the last three words of your question. Please address the question again.
Why is it important to make a phone call instead of the internet ping based on your experiences?
This is life or death. And you want to offer the best method of finding where that GPS location is and the best path to get there. And that involves being able to talk to someone and collaborate on the best path to get there versus just an internet ping where I can't really communicate that much with an internet ping.
And now, Ms. Heyman, I want to move from your training to your experiences working as an emergency liaison, generally speaking. What was it like working at Mountain Trackers when you first began your employment there?
Oh, when I first started working there, it was a really fun place to work at. It's a, adventure gear company. And so they would sometimes sponsor trips for us to like whitewater rafting or out to Lake Tahoe and things like that. It was really cool. They even had like a gear room for us to use gear. As long as we were doing our job, it was accessible to us. So that was really cool.
And Ms. Heyman, did it remain cool working at Mountain Trackers?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, at this time, I would object to the relevancy of this line of questioning. There's no fact of matter here at issue of whether or not it's cool to work at Mountain Trackers. This witness's experiences with that aren't any issue in this case.
I am confused by the question. What's your response, counsel?
I can rephrase my
Yes,
question.
please rephrase. Sustain.
Ms. Heyman, what was your experience? Did your experience working at Mountain Trackers change over time?
Yes, it did.
And did it negatively impact the way you were able to do your job at Mountain Trackers?
Yes, it did.
And Ms. Heyman, how did it change?
So in the summer of 2021, I started working there in 2017. And then in the summer of 2021, they started making staffing cuts. They stopped all those trips they used to provide. They stopped that. They cut access to the venture gear we used to get. And then they just started really cutting the staff down. So we were running on like bare bones minimum staff.
And Ms. Heyman, I want to talk specifically about the staffing cuts. How did these staffing cuts negatively impact your employment at Mountain Trackers?
Yeah, so when we had a bunch of staff, there was a lot of people to answer these emergency alerts, but with less staff, then we are getting overloaded with a bunch of alerts. And especially when something chaotic like a blizzard comes in, it makes it really hard for me to be able to respond to all the alerts that can be coming in at that time.
And when there are multiple alerts coming in at one time, what do you mean by it makes it harder for you to do your job?
Yeah, so like I said, the best way to assemble a search and rescue team is by collaborating with them over the phone. And so since we're overloaded, I could be on the phone with a search team from anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours. But if I've got all of these alerts coming in, I just can't be on the phone with all of these people at one time. It's physically impossible. And so I would have to resort to doing internet pings instead of calling.
And now I want to move to November 18th now, Ms. Heyman. On November 18th, were you working?
Yes, I was working the night shift that day.
And on that night, were you receiving phone calls?
Yes, I was.
At this time, Your Honor, I'd like to publish what's been pre-marked and pre-admitted as Exhibit 6. And Ms. Heyman, if I could direct you to Exhibit 6. Ms. Heyman, can you explain to the jury what this is?
Yeah, this is the Mountain Trackers tracking report for the SOS alert.
And what is an SOS alert, Ms. Heyman?
The SOS alert is just whenever someone pushes the button, that's the alert we get.
And so is this alert we're looking at right now, is this specific to a particular user of Mountain Trackers equipment?
Yes, this report shows the alert from Logan Day and his device.
And Ms. Heyman, when was this device activated?
This was activated. You mean when was it,
On what day was it activated?
like used? When was it pressed?
Yes, ma'am.
It was used on November 18th.
And what time was the SOS received by your company?
At 8:47 Mountain Standard Time.
And now, Your Honor, may I publish to the jury what's been pre-marked and pre-marked and admitted as exhibit number 7?
8:47 AM or PM?
It would be PM, Your Honor.
Which exhibit, sir?
Exhibit 7.
Pre-admitted, you never see.
Ms. Heyman, what is this exhibit showing the jury?
This is a shift log report that shows kind of all the calls I got whenever I was on duty.
And this was your shift log for November 18th?
Yes.
And so, Ms. Heyman, I want to direct your attention and the jury's attention to report number 7. What is important, if anything, about report number 7?
Yeah, that's the alert for Logan Day.
And Ms. Heyman, what was the method of contact for Mr. Logan Day's SOS alert?
It had to be by the internet. Yeah.
And you said it had to be by the internet. Why was that?
Well, if you look up at number 5, I had gotten another alert at 7:45, and I used the phone method to alert services, and I was on that call for quite a long time until 9:02:48.
And based on your experience and knowledge, Ms. Heyman, why were you unable to make another phone call?
Yeah, because I was on that call that I'd gotten earlier, the alerts I was getting after that, I had to send to the internet.
And Ms. Heyman, if there were more people staffed based on your experience working at Mountain Tracker, would you have been able to better service the pings that came in after the phone calls?
For sure, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Heyman. No further questions for the witness at this time.
Exoneration counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Hyman, you used to work for Mountain Trackers, right?
Yes, I did.
But you don't anymore.
No, I don't.
You didn't quit.
I got let go.
You were fired
Let go, fired, yep, anything.
by this person sitting right here.
Yeah.
What made you upset?
Nobody enjoys it.
Well, to be clear, you called it bullshit.
But I think that's what I put in my report at the time.
You're angry.
Like I said, it's not fun getting let go of your job.
You thought it was completely unfair to you.
I was upset about it.
You thought it was unfair.
Yeah, kind of.
Thought you did nothing wrong.
No, I don't think I did anything wrong.
And now you're here testifying against your fault.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the night of November 8th, right? To be clear, you were working that night as a responder.
Yes, I was.
Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but I want to be very clear with the jury what your job as a responder is, okay?
Sure.
Someone gets into a situation, they press that SOS button, right?
Yep.
It sends a ping to you, correct?
Mhm.
And then you get in contact with EMS.
That's what I do.
So it's fair to say you're the middleman, right?
Yeah, and I also help them to just find the best path to the alert.
Sure, but you're not on the ground with EMS, are you?
No, I'm on the phone.
Right, you're not
Ideally.
scaling mountains,
No,
you're not in rivers.
that's not my job.
It's EMS's job to do the rescue.
Yes.
It's not Mountain Tracker's responsibility to rescue people.
No, we just do the devices.
Right. And like you said earlier, on November 18th, you did your job. Correct?
I did it, not the best way I could, but I did it.
Well, I'm going to be very clear. You agree phone call, in your opinion, is the best way to put people in contact with their EMS servers, right?
That's not an opinion. That's what we were trained
Well, you don't know that for a fact, do you? It's what you were told.
by mountain trackers.
Sure. But to be clear, you don't think that pinging someone, giving them notification over the internet, you don't think that that's completely ineffective, do you?
No.
It can save people, correct?
Yeah. If it works.
If it works, correct? And to be clear, EMS was notified of Logan Day's situation, wasn't
Yeah, they got the internet thing.
it? They received it, correct?
I actually don't know if they received it. I guess.
To be
I
clear,
sent it.
you sent it, right? So at that point, it was in EMS's hands, correct?
Yeah, because I couldn't contact them and communicate with them about anything, so I sent it and that's the best I could do.
It was no longer Mountain Tracker's responsibility at that point. It was EMS's.
I don't really know.
Well, EMS was the one who had the notification, correct?
I sent it. Yeah, I don't know if they got it.
Well, they would have gotten it, correct?
I'd hopefully, yeah, ideally.
And it'd be them going to save Logan Day?
Yeah.
Not Mountain Trackers.
I guess.
Is that a note of my question? It wouldn't be Mountain Trackers going to save Logan Day?
I mean, I don't really know because I don't know how much EMS relies on our help to find them.
Well, it's not Mountain Tracker employees, correct, doing the rescuing.
It's not mountain tracker employees doing rescue.
It's emergency medical services.
Yes, and we tell them where to go.
And you did tell them where to go that night.
Well, I couldn't do it in person, so
That wasn't my question. You told them where to go.
I gave them an alert for where the location was.
Thank you, Ms. Hagan. No further questions.
Brief regret, John. Ms. Heyman, why were you fired from Mountain Trackers?
Well, after this incident, the incident happened in November and I was fired in December. And so I don't actually know the real reason why I was fired, but I think it might have been because of this incident.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your answer.
I think it might have been because of this incident, but I don't actually know.
I I'm gonna ask everybody to speak up. All right, proceed. Do you have something to say, Council?
Yes, Your Honor, I would object to the last portion of that testimony that I think I was fired because of this incident as
Sustained.
speculation.
Sustained. Proceed. Speculative.
Thank you.
And don't speculate.
Ms. Heyman, what was the best procedure for contacting EMS services based on your training?
Calling
And based on the training you received, why was that the case?
to help them find the best path to getting to the GPS location in poor weather conditions.
And why were you not able to make a call on November 18th when Logan Day sent an SOS ping to mountain trackers?
We were so short-staffed that I could not simply handle the amount of calls I was getting in for alerts that day.
Thank you, Ms. Heyman. No further questions for the witness at this time. May she step down.
Any other questions?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. Does that conclude last case?
Your Honor, before we rest our case in chief, we would like to read in stipulation number 11 into the record.
You may.
Sasha Heyman and Nahal Saeed were employed by Mountain Trackers LLC during all times relevant to this case. Mountain Trackers LLC is responsible for any harm caused by Sasha Heyman or Nahal Saeed's negligence while acting within the scope of their employment relationship.
Right. Anything else from the plaintiff?
Not at this time.
You rest?
We rest our case in chief.
All right. Then it's going to first witness.
Your Honor, before we begin our case in chief, is it all right if we just take a brief 5-minute recess?
We certainly can.
Thank you, Your Honor.
It's, there we go.
Weird seeing a PI case without a family member. Weird seeing a PI case without a family member. Yeah.
It's a secret. It's really contractors now. You see. Do we have anything to discuss before the defense calls the first witness?
Nothing from the defense.
Oh, well,
Nothing from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
oh. Let's call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Ms. Nahel Saeed. Good afternoon, Ms. Saeed.
Good afternoon.
Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Nehal Saeed.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Saeed?
I am the founder and CEO of Mountain Trackers.
Let's talk about mountain trackers. We've heard a little bit about it today, and you've been in the courtroom, right?
I absolutely have.
So from your perspective, what is Mountain Trackers?
Mountain Trackers is a company that I founded that provides hikers or outdoor adventurers with an extra tool, one of many tools to help keep them safe on the trails.
And what is this tool that you just referenced?
It's a GPS system that allows hikers or other people who are outside to contact emergency services by pressing a button.
How does it work?
Basically, if somebody finds themselves in a dangerous situation, they can press a button on their GPS watch that pings our system. Our system then transmits that out to emergency services. And at that point, it's in the hands of the emergency services.
Okay. Why'd you come up with this device?
I myself am actually an avid outdoor adventurer. I really enjoy hiking, biking, all things of that nature. And a few years ago, I had a pretty scary run-in. It was really rainy outside and I kind of got lost and fell down. Thankfully, my injuries weren't too serious and I wasn't too far off the beaten path, so I had access to cell data. But I started to worry about maybe if I hadn't had access to cell data, what would I have done in that situation? And that's why I created Mountain Tracker.
Well, I'm certainly happy you're still with us.
Thank you.
Is your advice intended to be a cure-all?
Absolutely not. As I said earlier, it's one of many tools that adventurers could add to their tool belt to help keep them safe.
So what kind of guarantees does Mountain Trackers give their customers regarding the use of this device?
There really aren't many guarantees. The one guarantee we do have is that if they do press that SOS button, we will transmit that to the local emergency authority.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you give your customers, any kind of guidance with what this device is intended to be used for?
Absolutely. With the purchase of a GPS device, all people have to get a subscription to our services. And with that subscription comes a contract or a set of terms and conditions where users are informed of what kind of limits the product has.
And I want to be clear here. Who receives this contract?
Every single customer that uses our services.
And what does acceptance of this contract look like?
Acceptance of this contract looks like reading the whole thing and then pressing a button. It's an electronic system to accept the terms of this agreement.
So just to make it clear, the use of your device is acceptance of the terms of that contract.
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 5?
Is it this council?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, proceed.
Ms. Saeed, do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
This is a set of those terms and conditions I was discussing regarding the use of our product.
And is this a true and correct copy of those terms and conditions?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, defense moves Exhibit 5 into evidence.
Your Honor, can I just object?
What's your objection?
We re-raised our objection from the beginning of this trial. Specifically, the inclusion of this contract will confuse the issues for the jury. The claims we're bringing against the defendant today involve their failure to exercise reasonable care for our client, Mr. Logan Day. The introduction of this contract may make clear what the reasonable care was, but as we discussed earlier as well, the parties have already stipulated what that duty entails. We believe that, once again, clause 6, the limitation of liability, and the language included within will confuse the issues of the jury about whether or not the defendant is even able to be brought in court today regarding their liability. And for that reason, this exhibit cannot come in. But if it does come in, we ask that clause 6, 61.1, 61.12, 61.13 all be redacted.
I believe this was discussed pre-trial. Do you have anything to add to what you said pre-trial about this?
Yes, Your Honor, I would add that we also have a further defense today. That's contributed negligence. And while counsel is right that it does depict liability language, in reality, what this goes to is what Mr. Day would have accepted. She just testified. Anybody who uses our device accepts it. And I know that you have a copy in front of you. The first line of that is, by using our products, you are accepting these terms and conditions.
You should be overruled. You can deal with this on closing argument.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to publish Exhibit 5 to the jury.
And of course, cross.
Mr. Hudson, could you try to make that a little more clear? Ms. Saeed, you have a copy of this in front of you, right?
I do.
Okay. I want to go down to paragraphs. Well, actually, let's start at the top.
Okay.
Could you explain what this top, why this top term is in there?
Absolutely. So it's a notice to everybody who uses our services stating that by using our GPS tracker and subscription associated with that, they're accepting the terms and conditions listed within this document.
And is this what you referenced earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Let's jump down to number 6.
Okay.
Now, it says limitation of liability. Is that right?
It is.
Okay. I want to read, or I would rather, instead of reading it word for word, I'd rather you tell us what 6.11 means.
6.11 addresses things that are outside of mountain tracker's control, namely dangerous weather conditions like rain, things like terrorism as well, and then of course snow, which is what was involved here. Because as much as we'd like to protect against all of these things, there's an inherent risk when you're out hiking in the wilderness. And that risk of danger can never be brought down to 0.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to the next page, Ms. Josie. What about 6.1.2?
6.1.2 is a notice that things like the failure of the EMS to be able to arrive on the scene, given those dangerous conditions suggested, might also be out of our control in certain circumstances.
And 6.1.3?
That deals with the GPS location of the individuals. It's possible that at times that might not be entirely accurate. So there's also a disclaimer to that as well.
Okay, so to wrap it up all in a bow, what are your customers informed of when they use your products?
They're informed of the fact that our products are limited to notifying the emergency services in the area. It does not include a guarantee that the EMS will be able to arrive on the scene. And as unfortunate as it is, there are certain circumstances that we've listed out here that might prevent EMS from being able to help them if the situation arises.
Thank you, Ms. Said. You've been present in the courtroom today,
Yes, I have.
and one of your former employees was here today.
That's correct.
Why were they let go?
They were let go because they couldn't keep up with their responsibilities.
And did you hear them talk about how there wasn't enough people working?
I heard her say that, yes.
Is that true?
No, after we were struggling slightly in order to make sure that everybody was able to keep their jobs, our response was to cut back on individuals' hours so everybody was able to remain with the company.
So when you say struggling slightly, what did you mean by that?
So during COVID, when everybody was being more outdoorsy, going on more hikes and walks with their families, we had a huge surge in our demand for our product. But when things returned back to normal in 2021, unfortunately, less people were using our products regularly as they had been in 2020. And so there was less demand, meaning that we struggled slightly financially.
And so what was your response in the face of that financial struggle?
In order to make sure that all of our employees wouldn't lose their jobs, we did have to cut back on their hours. And unfortunately, a result of that was also cutting back on some of the benefits they had once received, like the vacations. But again, we wanted to make sure they kept their job. And that's why we did it.
I'm sorry. Did I hear you correctly when you say that you actually cut back employee hours?
Yes, we did.
Let's move on to the day or the incident. The reason why we're here today, the tragic loss of Mr. Day.
Yes.
Got permission to approach with what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 6 and 7.
That's what I
This would be what opposing counsel has already admitted as evidence. Thank you. Do you have a copy in front of you?
I should, yes. I have both of them in front of me.
Okay. Now, I want to look at Exhibit 6 first.
Okay.
Your Honor, permission to publish to the jury?
Yes, correct.
Okay. You were in the courtroom earlier, and you heard your former employee describe this section where it says alert information.
Yes,
Was she accurate in her description?
it's my understanding that she was not.
Okay, so why don't you give us an accurate description of what this means?
Sure. So this alert information is coming from Logan Day's device. Where it says time transmitted, that is when our employees transmitted the data to the EMS service. Time received, based on my understanding, is when EMS received that notification. And then time assigned to Sasha Heyman is when Sasha Heyman had access to her own individual logbook, which I believe is Exhibit 7.
Okay, now let's take a look at Exhibit 7. Your Honor, permission to publish? Okay, so why don't you explain how Exhibit 7 and 6 work together?
Sure. So in Exhibit 6, where you see time assigned 2048-24, that's when Sasha Heyman had access to her logbook regarding this specific case. And then I just don't want to make sure we get the line right here. 779. So this is when it opened in Sasha Heyman's logbook. Now, based on what Sasha Heyman described the events of the night to be, having been on the phone at the same time this came through, I can't be entirely sure what process she used to log this particular transmission.
Thank you. Ms. Said, did your device work as intended?
Yes, it did.
And more specifically, did Mr. Day's device work as intended?
I have no reason to believe that it did not.
Nothing further. I pass the witness.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Ms. Said, I want to go back and talk more about your testimony regarding tools in the tool belt.
Okay.
You mentioned your tracker device is a tool in a hiker's tool belt. Is that correct?
That's one way you can certainly think about it. It's something that they have with them. So kind of as a metaphor, that would be in their tool belt devices they might have to protect themselves on the trail.
And as an experienced hiker yourself, you expect every tool in your tool belt to work when you use it, correct?
Certainly as I'm expecting them to work, although I can't have heightened expectations of everything I have with me if that's not what they're intended to be used for.
But let's do an example. You have a carboner. This is something you use for climbing, correct?
Yes, a carabiner.
You, a carabiner, you bring this tool with you to go climbing? Yes?
Yes, if you're climbing, that would be something you bring with.
And you expect this carabiner to work correctly when you hook into the side of the mountain, yes?
If I'm hooking it in correctly, then yes, I would expect that.
And using it correctly, the correct use of your tracker device is to press a button, yes?
That's correct.
And when that button is pressed, an emergency liaison person at your company is alerted, yes?
Yes,
And once they are alerted, it is your company's policy that they call the local EMS services, yes?
it's the policy for them to contact. Now, there is a little bit of discrepancy between calling and sending an internet ping. If the situation allows for a phone call, we do prefer that. But in the case when that's not available, internet pinging is sufficient as well.
But based on your company's policies, the ideal situation is to call the local EMS services, yes?
Absolutely. If the conditions are right for it, it's ideal to call the services.
And the right conditions are fully staffed emergency liaison service, yes?
Sure, that can be part of the right circumstances. It also depends on who's on shift and how many other calls are coming in at the same time.
But ideally, based on your company policy, you want to have as many people as possible. So every SOS ping has a phone call, yes?
Ideally, that would be the case. Of course, we can't anticipate, especially given certain weather conditions, how many calls might be coming in at one time. There's no way for us to know how many individuals we would need on any particular evening, given the fact that many people could be hiking at once or less people may be hiking at one time.
And now, Ms. Saeed, I want to talk about the staffing on November 18th in particular.
Okay.
You mentioned during your testimony today that you never had to lay anybody off, correct?
We didn't have to lay anybody off because of the financial struggles during COVID.
But you did have to reduce your emergency staff, right?
Reduce emergency staff in terms of cutting back on their hours. So we didn't have as many people working at one time. Their hours were a little bit more staggered.
Ms. Saeed, I'm confused. Were their hours staggered or were there less people working at one time?
That would be the same thing. So not everybody was working at once. So for example, one individual might work a 6-hour shift and another individual would come and work the next 6 hours, as opposed to both people working 12-hour shifts at the same time.
So just so I'm clear, Ms. Saeed, you shifted your hours given to your employees so that you had one person working at one time and another person working at another time?
Just as an example, there wasn't just one person working at any given time.
And so on November 18th, when Sasha was working at your company, was she the only person working?
I don't believe she was the only person on shift.
But had you reduced the number of people on the shift with her?
In comparison to back in 2020, yes, but that doesn't mean there were limited numbers.
But there were less people on her shift on November 18th.
Then in 2020, yes, given the lack of demand that we were having at that time.
Okay. And now I want to talk more about Sasha Heyman and why she was fired. Ms. Saeed, she was fired because she was doing too many internet things, right?
She was fired because she was unable to keep up with the demand of her job.
But Ms. Saeed, part of the demand of her job was following safety protocols, right?
That certainly is part of it.
And the safety protocol she wasn't following was making phone calls, correct?
That's not necessarily true.
But
She was unable
Ms.
to.
Saeed, you told Ms. Sasha when you fired her that she needed to follow safety and not efficiency, right?
That is certainly part of it. However, the fact that she was on the phone while simultaneously receiving other pings was not being able to keep up with her responsibility. I was never notified of the fact that she was being overwhelmed during any given shift. Had I known that, things might have been shifted.
But at least in part, she was fired because she failed to make the proper amount of phone calls relative to internet things, yes?
That's not necessarily true. There's no ratio that's required of any given employee. It really depends on the circumstances.
In Ms. Sasha's circumstances, Ms. Saeed, was she fired because she had too many internet things?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to ask the answer. I believe the witness has answered this question.
I believe this can be a little repetitive.
May I briefly?
You can rephrase the question. There's a little bit of leeway, but not much more. Go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Knight, I want to be clear for the jury and the record as to why Ms. Sasha was fired. And I want to understand if she was fired, at least in part, because she had too many internet pings during her shifts.
That's not really a yes or no question. It could be in part, but it's mainly because of the fact that while she was on the phone, she was receiving simultaneous other pings. So it's the fact that nobody else was notified about the fact that she was receiving too many communications at once and was unable to keep up with that workload.
So,
Ma'am, the question was at least in part. Did you answer the question, yes?
At least in part, given that
Proceed, counsel.
circumstance.
and I want to talk more about is the number of pings and phone calls you mentioned. You said part of it was because she had too many internet pings and she wasn't successfully completing them. I'm confused, Ms. Knight. What do you mean by she had too many internet pings?
For example, on the night of November 18th, as she was discussing earlier, Ms. Halen was on the phone while she received 3 other pings. So the fact if she was being overloaded and felt stressed out, that should have been something that was addressed.
And so, just to be clear, there should have been some kind of notification for another person to take those phone calls.
Not necessarily on the night in question. It's my understanding that Ms. Heyman felt stressed out even before that for the entire month of November, yet nobody was notified of it.
But there were not enough people taking phone calls on November 18th to meet your standard of your company services, correct?
That's not correct.
So the number of people taking phone calls was okay on November 18th.
The number of people we had on staff was sufficient.
And that met your high standard of safety protocols at your company.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
The service provided on November 18th was satisfactory to your safety standards for your company.
Absolutely. Because the internet ping was marked as received by the emergency company, that was satisfactory. That's the guarantee that we provide to our clients.
And you fired Ms. Sasha Halen, at least in part, because she was doing too many internet pings, yes?
Because she was unable to keep up with the demand.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Brief redirect, Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Said, is an internet ping sufficient to save someone?
Absolutely, especially when marked as received by the emergency services.
And has an internet ping saved someone in the past?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Nothing further. This witness, we excuse you on.
Any other questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may be excused. Thank you. I said yes.
No, you're fine, Your Honor.
All right, Vince, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Cameron Jones.
Jones, you can take the stand.
Appreciate to proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Well, good afternoon.
How you doing?
Doing good. Would you mind introducing yourself to the jury?
My name is Cameron Jones.
What do you do for work, Mr. Jones?
Part of what I do now, I was a wilderness firefighter at Reba Backcountry. And then I've recently been serving for 4 years with the local search and rescue team.
How are you involved in today's case?
In November 24th, I received a phone call from Ms. Delgado reporting that Logan Day was missing on the CDT trail.
And were you the one to find the body of Mr. Logan Day?
Unfortunately, I was.
We'll talk about that incident in a moment. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the trails that you manage. Now, what area are you in charge of over there at the Rio Rebo County Search and Rescue Team?
Pretty much the entire backcountry.
And could you describe that backcountry?
I mean, it's beautiful scenery. I mean, you see pictures that you could only imagine on Google or Google Earth images, but to see the real thing, it's pretty breathtaking.
Are those trails out there easy ones to hike?
No,
What makes them difficult?
you're in the wilderness. They're not your typical trails that you go through in your local parks. There's a laundry list of items, things that can kill you on these trails.
I want to be clear about when you got involved in this case. When did you first get alerted to Logan Day's disappearance?
On November 24th.
And how were you alerted?
Ms. Delgado placed a phone call to the office.
Well, I want to be clear, Mr. Jones. When Ms. Delgado called you, did she say she was from Mountain Truckers?
No.
You know what a Mountain Tracker GPS is?
I know what it is.
Could you describe to the jury your understanding of it?
I understand it's some form of technology that you press a button out there and it sends a GPS signal out. So the rescue might be able to find you.
I want to be very clear about this, Mr. Jones. Were you ever contacted about Mr. Day's disappearance by a GPS tracking signal from Mountain Trackers?
Oh, no,
Hold on, so you have no record of that, is that correct?
I have no record of that. My office does keep records of GPS trackers or EMS logs that were sent in. We have no record of that.
To be clear, who was it that put you into contact on this case?
Ms. Delgado.
And after receiving that contact, what did you do?
We immediately compiled a search team together. We got a aerial surveillance up in the sky. We got our avalanche gear ready to go. We headed out.
What were the conditions like when you headed out?
It was a blizzard. Blizzard came in on November 17th. There was still a significant amount of snow on the ground. So it was difficult to go through, and that's why we got the airplane in the sky.
What did that search end up leading to?
We ultimately found Logan Day at a Eureka State Park campground.
What was Mr. Day's condition when you arrived?
He is deceased.
If you'd been notified by a GPS tracker signal a week earlier, what would you have done?
Other than everything I can to save Mr. Day.
And were you ever notified of GPS tracker?
I was not.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. No further questions.
May I proceed?
Just one second. All right, proceed.
Now, Mr. Jones, you have years of experience out in the wilderness, correct?
I do.
And you're familiar with how the backpackers and hikers, how they use this backcountry.
Yes.
That includes sometimes these hikers, they go out in groups.
Mhm.
Sometimes they go out alone.
Yes.
Sometimes they go on a set trail.
Yes.
Sometimes they go off the beaten path.
They do.
Some people go out in the summer.
That they do.
Some people go out in the winter.
Unfortunately,
Some people go out when it's sunny.
they do.
Some people go out when it's rainy.
Mhm.
My point in this being is that people hike anytime, anywhere, and in any condition.
Yes.
Now, you stated you're familiar with the GPS tracking devices, right?
I have an understanding of what they determined to do. Yeah.
Now, what is your understanding of why people would use a GPS device,
Find out where they're going.
a GPS emergency device?
GPS emergency device should send off a signal to hopefully a local EMS like my facility, and we send out a search and rescue team.
in situations when they're in trouble.
Yes.
And they would use those. Would it be fair to say that these people would use them anytime, anywhere, and in any condition?
Yes.
And you found one of those emergency GPS devices, the mountain truckers GPS devices on Mr. Day when you found his body, correct?
That's correct.
Let's talk a little bit more about Mr. Logan Day. I want to talk to you about when you found him. That was on December 2nd, right?
That's right.
Now, that was 8 days after you received the call from Miss Delgado.
Yes.
And when you found him, he had a journal on him, didn't he?
It did.
Permission to publish Exhibit 9 has been admitted. Now, looking at this journal, it showed you that after he sent out that signal, Mr. Day was still alive.
Yes.
In fact, his journal entry ranged from November 16th to November. We know that he died on November 30th, correct?
So I'm not entirely sure of it.
That's 14 days, right?
It's a significant amount of time.
That means that Mr. Day spent those days out alone in the wilderness, correct?
It is good there, huh?
He was alone, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was cold.
It was a blizzard.
He was hungry.
Yes.
He was thirsty.
I'm sure he would be.
He was scared,
I don't know. Scared.
not knowing if help was ever gonna arrive.
Nothing but right, yeah.
When we look at those journal entries, his last known words were, "I am doomed." Is that correct?
Yes.
Any further questions?
Redirect, Your Honor.
Yes.
Mr. Day, do you have a copy of what you just read from there with you?
No clear question of what you just read.
Oh, your apology, Your Honor. I was asking you to have a copy of this that was just read from.
Journal.
Yes.
All right. It is.
Could you turn to the second page or the first page where it says 11/18/21?
I see that.
Read the first sentence there.
Feeling terribly weak, like I've got the flu or something, still camped at the same spot, haven't left.
Mr. Jones, would you recommend a hiker go out in those conditions if they were feeling ill?
Absolutely not.
Would you recommend a hiker go out in those conditions at all?
No.
Why?
It's a blizzard.
Is that unsafe?
It's very unsafe.
Would you recommend even an experienced hiker who's done hundreds and hundreds of trails go out in that condition?
Just because you're experienced doesn't mean you can survive the cold weather.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. No further questions.
Any more questions?
No further questions.
You may step down. Hold on. You start. So we've heard from both defense witnesses, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense closes its case in chief. We would ask for a brief 5-minute recess before closing.
Let's take it. How long is each shot? Sorry.
Your Honor, the remaining time, that's about 15 minutes, we're planning to take that long. Okay.
Be seated. Anything for the court before we proceed to closing arguments?
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
All right, we will now hear from the plaintiff, closing arguments.
Okay, please the court.
It does.
Anytime, anywhere, any condition, we've got your back. That's what the defendant, Mountain Tracker, told our client, Mr. Logan Day. On November 18, 2021, the defendant failed my client, Mr. Logan Day, and he died. He died because the defendant failed to uphold the promise that they made. Anytime, anywhere, any condition, we've got your back. Now, sure, let's talk about those conditions on November 18th. It was cold, it was snowing. These are the circumstances that an expert hiker like Logan Day was used to. He was familiar with them, and so he equipped himself with the proper tools to do anything possible to get through his experience. One of those tools was the Tracker Gen 4. Now, throughout this trial, there was a lot of talk about internet pings, EMS phone calls, what services were provided. But gentlemen of the jury, let's be very clear. The services provided were GPS services. Mountain Trackers promised that they would send the GPS location of people like Mr. Logan Day to local EMS services so that when they needed it, anytime, anywhere, any condition, their back would be had. And it's those services, those GPS services, that were not provided by Mountain Trackers on November 18th. Today, you've heard from Mr. Logan's friend, Ms. Gabby Delgado. Ms. Delgado told you about the experience of Mr. Logan and how he had hiked the Triple Crown. He had seen some of the most treacherous conditions hikers had seen and gotten through them. And you also heard from Ms. Delgado that she had to call local EMS services on November 24th to tell them that her friend, Logan Day, was missing. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I want to make something very clear. Logan Day used the product of Mountain Trackers on November 18th. That service, that product was supposed to notify local EMS that he needed help. And you heard today, local EMS came up here. The defense fought you local EMS. They came up here and told you they didn't hear anything. November 18th, they didn't get an internet ping. They didn't get a phone call. They had no idea that Mountain Trackers failed to have Mr. Logan's back. But it doesn't stop there. You heard from Mountain Trackers' own employee, and it was their own employee, and let's be very clear, gentlemen of the jury. Both parties agree that the actions of that employee, Sasha Heyman, were the actions of Mountain Trackers. And Ms. Heyman was unable to fulfill her duty to Logan Day and make that phone call to local EMS. In fact, she was fired for it. Mountain Tracker CEO, Ms. Saeed, came up here today, and she didn't give us a lot of answers. Ms. Saeed didn't give me a single answer regarding what are the proper safety protocols. Why was Sasha Hayden fired? She couldn't tell you because she knew the safety protocols of her company weren't met. She knew that Sasha Heyman wasn't equipped with the proper resources in order to ensure that mountain trackers had Logan Day's back. And so, gentlemen of the jury, you heard today, mountain trackers did not ever have Logan Day's back. And that's important because in the claims we're bringing against them today, we had to prove to you by preponderance of the evidence that mountain trackers failed to exercise reasonable care to protect the physical safety and well-being of Logan Day. And Exhibit 5 is a contract outlining the services mountain trackers said they would provide. And the parties agree that there was a duty to Logan Day. And the defense spent a lot of time trying to define, oh, all we had to do was let local EMS know. That's all our services had to do. But gentlemen of the jury, they didn't even do that. They didn't even let local EMS know. But that's not the reasonable care that they owed. The reasonable care that they owed was to ensure that their service, their product, that anytime, anywhere, any condition would have his back was there. And they failed to do that by failing to give Sasha Heyman the proper staffing on her night shift. So not only did the defense fail to meet their reasonable care for providing the proper resources to Sasha Heyman, they didn't even meet the bare minimum to contact local EMS services. So gentlemen of the jury, on element number 1, did mountain trackers fail to exercise reasonable care to protect the physical safety and well-being of Logan Day? No, they did not. No, they did not. And now element number 2, was mountain trackers failed to exercise reasonable care to protect the physical safety and well-being of Logan Day a substantial factor in causing harm to Logan Day? The defense's witness told you, Cameron Jones, they asked him, if you would have heard about Logan Day being trapped on November 18th, would you have saved him? He told you I would have done everything I could. But Mr. Cameron, the local EMS, didn't even know Logan Day was trapped until November 24th, days later. And gentlemen of the jury, let's be very clear. Mr. Logan was feeling sick on November 18th in the journal. That's the very day he sent the SOS. So it's not as if Mr. Logan assumed this risk. He was like, I'm not feeling well, I'm gonna go hiking. No, he recognized he was not feeling well and pulled out the tool he was expecting to work, the tracker Gen 4, and sent for help. But that tool did not work. So the fact that his journal on November 18th says, I was feeling sick is not important. But what we do need to look at is the last entry of his journal 10 days after he sent his SOS message. 3 words, I am doomed. And why was he doomed? Mountain Tracker failed to provide reasonable care. They failed to meet their duty. And Logan Day, the man who's not here today, died. So on number 2, check no. Excuse me, check yes. Mountain Tracker's failure to exercise reasonable care was a substantial factor causing the harm to Mr. Day. And number 3, this one's no. We established November 18th, Mr. Logan Day was feeling sick and he sent out that help. He didn't assume any unnecessary risk. He was not responsible for Mountain Tracker failing to meet their duties. And for that reason, your answer is no. And so, gentlemen of the jury, we ask you to look through the evidence presented to you today. And by preponderance of the evidence, weigh that evidence. And if you find what you've seen today to tip just lightly in our favor, find Mountain Tracker liable for the death of Mr. Logan Day. Thank you. Your Honor, may I reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal?
Sure, I'm not keeping the time. Does he have time to do that? Yes, you may do so. All right, Vince.
Your Honor, before I proceed, may I publish a few exhibits to the jury, specifically exhibits 6, 5, and 7? And with Your Honor, I would courtesy copy of those exhibits.
Sure, and is 5 the contract?
5 is the contract, which I believe you have a copy of. Okay, and then exhibit 6 is the SOS map tracking alert,
Okay,
and exhibit 7 is the log of the SOS alerts delivered to EMS.
thank you very much.
May I publish those to the jury?
You may.
Of course. Here's exhibit 7. Is it just share? Okay, no problem. And then here's the contract as well. And may I set the well briefly, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ready to proceed?
Yes.
May it please the court. Not every tragedy has someone to blame. That's exactly what happened here. What happened to Logan Day is a tragedy. But just because it happened to him, and just because it's tragic, doesn't make it Mountain Tracker's fault. There's been a lot of dispute over whether or not that GPS device worked as intended. It did. Or at the very least, there was no way to know for Mountain Trackers that it didn't. Both sides have disputed a lot in today's case, but there's one thing both sides agree on. You heard their witness say, and you heard our witness say. I received that GPS tracking signal from Logan Day. In fact, you saw it. Exhibit 6. This was the SOS alert that Miss Hayward received. She received this SOS alert from Logan Day, and what did she do? She sent it over to EMS. You saw that log. That was exhibit 7. Specifically, cause number 7. She sent it over to them at 2:48 via internet. At that point, members of the jury, I have to ask, what else could Mountain Trackers have done? You heard Ms. Saeed testify that they'd used internet ping before. It had alerted people about people in danger. They've been saved. That's what happened here. However, if it's anyone's fault, it's Mr. Jones's and EMS's fault. You heard him testify. We've got no record of this. Well, that's not our client's fault. The product worked as intended, at the very least, from Mountain Tracker's perspective. They received an SOS alert from someone in danger. They passed that SOS alert along to EMS. At that point, it's out of their hands, folks. It's not Mountain Tracker's job to go through that blizzard and find people. It's Mr. Jones's job. But he had no idea. Now, the plaintiffs know this, and they could have brought Mr. Jones and EMS and the services provided to court. But they didn't. Instead, they decided to pin this tragedy on us. And that's not right. It's not fair. At the end of the day, this product worked. Now, because it worked, when you go back there, you're going to see this form. And on that first one, you're going to check yes. Or no, apologies. Can't see the form in front of me. There we go. Did mountain trackers fail to exercise reasonable care to protect the well-being of the individual? The answer is no, because they did everything that they were supposed to do, everything that they promised. In fact, you saw exactly what Logan Day understood those terms to be. In that contract, the one Mr. Day read and the one that he signed, he understood that sometimes this product, it's going to do everything it can, but it's not going to be able to save you. That's EMS's job. No matter the conditions, no matter the weather, it's up to EMS to come out and save you. Not mountain trackers. At the end of the day, the product worked as intended. It wasn't faulty. It didn't fail. Everyone agrees, their witness and ours. We did everything we were supposed to do, everything we were taught to do. Would a phone call have been better? Maybe. But the point remains that people have been saved through that pinging system, and it will continue to save people. And the plaintiff put on no evidence that but for that call, Mr. Day would have been saved. Now, in regards to the second one you're going to see momentarily, the question you're asked is, was Mountain Tracker's failure to exercise reasonable care to protect the physical safety and well-being of Logan Day a substantial factor in causing harm to Logan Day? Now, I want to be clear about something. My opposing counsel mentioned that the duty you have is for the product to work and get your back as intended. That's not true. The duty we have is for reasonable care to be administered whenever we receive a notification that someone's in danger. We act as a reasonable person. That's exactly what we did. A system that had been used before and will be used again to save people was used. And EMS screwed it up. And additionally, folks, the plaintiff had to put on evidence that it's morally likely than not that because that product should have been, or that messaging should have been a phone call instead of a ping, Brian Day died. That but for that message being a phone call instead of a ping, he'd still be alive. We heard no evidence of that. We heard that sometimes it is better, but sometimes it's not. No expert testified as to how quick those responses can be. No expert testified as to how quick the pinging is versus the phone call. No one brought you evidence that if this had been a phone call in this specific instance, not generally, this specific instance, Brian Day would still be alive. And because they failed to do that, they did not meet their burden, and you have to put no on this form. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the third question you're going to see. And this question states, was the harm suffered by Logan Day more attributable to wrongful conduct by Logan Day than any wrongful conduct by mountain trackers? There are 2 points to this. First, as I've stated before, mountain trackers didn't do anything wrong. Our client pinged us. We sent that ping to EMS. We put it in their hands. We've trusted them before. And they dropped the ball. Now, folks, what happened to Logan Day is tragic. And it's, of course, upsetting. And we sympathize with him and his family for what they're going through. But the law states that when you do a risky and dangerous endeavor, You assume some of the risks of that endeavor. You heard Mr. Jones testify to the conditions that were on that trail. It was a blizzard 2 weeks after Mr. Roy had left, 2 weeks after it had stopped snowing. And yet Mr. Day went out in it anyway. A condition which a forest ranger and protective service person who had been monitoring that trail for the last 4 years, Mr. Jones, said, I wouldn't recommend the most experienced hiker I know to go in that weather. He chose to anyway. And it's unfortunate and it's tragic, but it's your job as the jurors to evaluate that decision and ask, was it risky? Is there some responsibility here? I believe that there is. And that's why we would ask you, but yes. Members of the jury, not every tragedy has someone to blame. Not every story has a villain. In this case, a man died while hiking. He used a product. That product worked and sent that message to EMS, and EMS failed to save him. Do not hold mountain trackers liable for the failures of an entirely different entity. Find our company not liable. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Heyman and Ms. Saeed did not agree. Ms. Saeed got up here and told this jury what Ms. Heyman said about her logs was incorrect. She said, in fact, the internet ping didn't go through, and that was in part why Ms. Heyman was fired. And for that reason, local EMS was never alerted. Local EMS was never alerted by the services that mountain trackers said they would provide to Logan Day. And for that reason, Mr. Day is dead. And for that reason, mountain trackers is liable. Thank you.
Right. I think the court's going to need time to tabulate. If you all could just hang for us a little bit, we'll be right back. How's that?
We can step out if you want, Your Honor.
That'll be fine, thank you.
Yes.
We'll come get you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah,
Good job.
Where's the ballot?
It's in the email, the last email. But it only works for the prelim rounds,
Yeah.
so you just need to tabulate it manually.
Do you know what?
You just need to tabulate it manually. It's just, there's no housekeeping score, it's just straight up opening, directs, crosses, and close.
Yeah, because I can pull up the old ballot. That's why I can.
No, I know, I'm just telling you, like,
Okay.
you can't submit it.
Gotcha.
can write mine down.
I mean, it's just gonna be
Yeah, I'm just,
total ballots, right? Because there's 3 judges, so just to simplify things, it's whoever you have winning.
I have all the math. I can write all the math down. Yeah.